It's Monday, November 17th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Wildfires, drought, flooding, disappearing shorelines, these are all climate change impacts people living in communities across this province are grappling with, and they're finding ways to adapt. That's the focus of today, day one of The Signal's third annual Climate Week. I'll tell you, when the words and the music all match and I actually hit the intro right, I feel like I deserve some kind of a chocolate or something. Look, a full week of climate coverage, and it comes as tens of thousands of delegates and observers are at the UN Climate Conference, COP30, in Belém, Brazil. So while COP negotiates transitioning away from fossil fuels and adopting sustainable sources of energy, right? Those are the ongoing discussions. The Signal, this show, with me, will connect through this week with local voices, and it's all around climate action. But before we go with local communities, and this is one of those few times, I think maybe the only time I will get to say, you know, we start in Brazil today, but then we will go to Hare Bay and we will also go to Trout River. So there you go. That's your world tour for today. And we're starting in Brazil because my CBC colleague at the UN Climate Conference, she's also a colleague of mine through the Oxford Climate Journalism Network, a previous cohort around climate learning that I'm still doing. I reached Jill earlier this morning in Brazil to talk about COP, and here is our chat. CBC International climate producer Jill English joins us on the line now from Brazil. Jill, how you doing?
Hi, doing well, thank you.
All right, Jill, so if you could, frame up this COP in Brazil and what folks are talking about.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess at first it's important to kind of explain what COP is. A lot of people don't really know. It's a huge gathering of 197 countries plus the European Union, where in theory all countries come together to talk about how to tackle climate change. And all countries here, in theory at least, get an equal voice. And so a lot of countries really value that, particularly smaller nations who are most at risk to the impacts of climate change. And so any agreements here have to be made by consensus, and every year there are themes that emerge as negotiators build upon the previous year's promises. And these COPs have been going on for 30 years. That's why this is COP 30. And so this COP, the major overarching theme is this idea of implementation, which basically means how do countries actually execute on the promises they have spent decades making. It's great, obviously, to have ambition, but we're at the point now where countries are realizing they need to figure out how to make those promises reality. So the first week of COP negotiations are behind us. We're heading into the second week where negotiations really ramp up, and over the weekend some more refined narratives started taking place. One is related to the 2023 COP promise to transition off fossil fuels and into renewables. Not everyone is buying into this roadmap right now that's been presented. So we'll see negotiators undoubtedly push, there's some push and pull depending on the country, coming out, doing press conferences, things like that. And it's important to note, I think, when countries are talking about the transition, it's not just about turning off the taps or denying people energy or leaving people without jobs. It's about what many are calling a just or fair transition, and that's why it's so complex to negotiate. It's the idea of making sure that we do this in a way that benefits all people and ultimately prevents extremely expensive disasters. Another big theme that we're seeing too is adaptation funding to countries most in need. So where mitigation refers to preventing climate change, adaptation is about protecting people from the impacts of climate change, which is inevitable at this point at a certain level. And it sounds like you'll be discussing some of this on your show this week on Newfoundland, but adaptation funding in the context of COP is often being talked about in terms of providing funds to developing countries. So a simple example would be giving money to a small island state so they can build a seawall to protect themselves from rising sea levels or storms. And we talked to a lead negotiator from the Maldives who did a really good job explaining why these small island states are really pushing for more money at this COP. He said the money is necessary because as climate change increases, or the impacts of climate change increase, countries like his are having to divert public funding away from healthcare or education to protect themselves from a problem they largely didn't cause. They're not oil producing countries. And so you can see the ripple effects of climate change, and it's complex issues like this that COP tries to manage. It's a really huge event with a lot of different storylines going on.
So, Jill, how are negotiations going? Because I know the U.S. is not there in a federal capacity. There have been state folks from different states like California there. But
Yep.
what can you say about the negotiations?
Yeah, so obviously the U.S. is not here. We saw Governor Gavin Newsom here last week and followed him around for a bit. But that's causing a lot of conversation here. What's the impact of not having the U.S. present? Obviously, they're a very wealthy nation, has a lot of influence, and so it does impact the talks. Others might say that they were actually a bit of a disruptor as a fossil fuel producing country. And so, one of the big narratives that's emerging around that is related to China, because it's opened an opportunity for China to step in and become a leader. And some of the things China wants COP30 to address relate to trade restrictions, which it says are stifling emission reductions, and green technology, basically, because they are leaders in that, and they've done a good job. They've made quite a lot of progress on their emissions, and so that gives them some credibility in this space.
So, Jill, you're following negotiations, you're following storylines there at COP. Talk to us a bit about what you've been covering so far, and also the push ahead for coverage.
Yeah, so as you can probably tell at this point, there's never-ending number of stories to cover here. COP is like a maze. It's full of country pavilions and events and meetings, and literally there's even concerts happening, hundreds of media, tens of thousands of delegates, kilometers of temporary infrastructure that we're walking through every day. So we have to pick stories that we think will best serve Canadians, and one of those stories was, of course, related to our own delegation. Prime Minister Mark Carney chose not to attend the Leaders Summit ahead of COP, and our Environment and Climate Change Minister's short visit here actually overlapped with the government's major projects announcement at home last week, which included an LNG project in British Columbia. Of course, that's a fossil fuel project, and so the timing of that had a lot of Canadian activists on the ground here feeling betrayed and disappointed, and so they were speaking out about that. And we also spoke to some international analysts that were concerned about the message that sends. It's a similar storyline to another story we worked on before COP started, actually, which is, Brazil is facing a similar paradox as a big oil producer. It just approved offshore exploration north of here. So we took a big road trip to the northern tip of Brazil by plane, car, and boat, where residents of a small city called Oiapoque are anticipating an oil boom offshore, and many indigenous groups are raising concerns. And of course, protests have been a big storyline here too, and something we've been covering a lot. This COP is right in the Amazon, near indigenous territories, and COP leadership has said at press conferences, they did this intentionally, that there was one day last week where security was actually breached by activists pushing past the COP entrance, and another day indigenous activists peacefully blocked the entrance, causing long lines for smaller alternative entrances at the venue. And the message they're sending is these meetings aren't including their needs or their knowledge as sort of protectors of the Amazon.
So, Jill, I'm just kind of wondering, as you're week 2, and then you'll be coming back to Canada, back to Toronto with CBC. But when you go to these things, especially this one, to be right in the Amazon and talk about everything you just discussed, what has stood out for you personally with all of this?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is my 4th COP, so everyone's a little different because they're hosted in different places, and I think the choice of location this year has been very interesting. Not only is it in Brazil, but Brazil's president Lula was very vocal in the months leading up to this about his mission to host this event right in the Amazon rainforest and to bring money into a city that needed it. We're in Belém, and this city is not usually a city that hosts international events, so there's been challenges with that, from accommodation to general infrastructure. And it would have been a lot easier to host it in a city like Rio or Sao Paulo. But to be right inside the forest is quite a powerful message that Brazil wanted to put on the table, and the people here have been so inviting and proud to welcome the world. So I think that that's something that will stay with me. COPs are always great for just in the sense that they bring the world together in a physical space on society's biggest collective challenge. And there's always something about these events that feels hopeful to me in spite of the challenges and limitations that we report on. And so while science tells us we're off track, it's also true that warming projections were significantly worse before the Paris Agreement was signed at COP 10 years ago. And if you want to learn more about that, my colleague Emily Chung did a great story for the website explaining what's happened since Paris and what the role of these COPs are.
So check out cbcnews.ca or just Google Emily Chung there. Jill, thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Okay, that was my conversation 2 hours ago with Jill English, CBC International Climate producer, who was in Belém, Brazil at COP30, the UN Climate Conference, as negotiations are ongoing. So that's the big, broad international look with a Brazilian flavor to it. Here with me now in studio, Kathleen Perwick, the lead for Climate Ready NL with municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador, and Ashley Smith, managing director, Fundamental Inc. Hello to you both. Thanks for coming back.
Hi.
Hi.
And like that conversation, sometimes stuff can obviously, when it's somewhere as far away as Brazil, it can feel a world away. And then climate change can sometimes feel, but it's so far away in some ways. But then all you got to do is look in Newfoundland and Labrador, and the signs of it are all over. I'm just wondering if anything jumped out to both of you from that discussion.
Certainly the community experience of change, that conversation that is pulled forward into these international spaces, but ultimately looks like coastal flooding and sea level rise and people losing ground and having the circumstances that were radically altered by the changes that are afoot. And having, the sense of, no real immediate local control, because, of course, it is a global phenomenon now that's landing unevenly on people around the world.
Ashley?
I echo exactly what you were thinking. It's the notion that the impacts of climate change are a human experience.
Yeah.
It's not a Maldivian experience. I might have that wrong. I'm so sorry if I do. Or a Newfoundlander experience, or anyone else. It's a human issue, and that there's always complexities in terms of trying to find solutions. But I do love that the general feeling that Jill had there was hopeful, even within the challenging and complex consensus-based negotiation.
Well, that last point by Jill, I've been in some of the climate meetings I've been part of with whether it's CBC and also that international network I've been working with. That hopeful bit has always been there, I found, because as Jill said, right, you go back and you look 10 years ago when we had this Paris Agreement. Okay, we're trying to limit global warming, and you look at projections, like she said, they have changed, right? Effort has changed those projections. Is it where it should be compared to what everyone said for the pledges? No. But is it looking a lot better? Is it trending in a better direction? Yeah, it is. And so 100% on the hopeful side of it. Remind folks about Fundamental Inc., if you could.
Absolutely. So Fundamental Inc. is a climate action consulting firm. So we work with municipalities, not-for-profits, businesses, and we look at creating strategic actions to address both climate mitigation, so reducing your emissions, as well as addressing climate hazards and vulnerabilities through adaptation planning and strategies. And then the goal is that once we've identified those, we can also help each of those organizations find funding or a financially feasible way to start addressing those.
Excellent. Kathleen, I'm just kind of wondering a couple lines on Climate Ready NL before we go to a guest who's waiting on the line, who I think both of you know, but yeah, and we'll give it an introduction shortly, but just tell us about it.
So Climate Ready NL is an adaptation-focused capacity building program for the municipal sector in this province. And it's based on a partnership of the four most active sector representing organizations. So municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, who I work for, the professional municipal administrators who represent your town clerks and town managers and the like, the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Fire Services, so your 6,000 plus mostly volunteer firefighters, and the Stewardship Association of Municipalities.
Yeah, and in my introduction, right, I said wildfires, right? So nowadays, all of a sudden, this past summer, we talked about fuel breaks. We've talked about fire weather and how the season has expanded. There's been drought discussions. We talk about disappearing shorelines. We talk about storm surges, like rising sea levels, all of these. So depending where you are in this province, if you're right on the coast, well, you have ocean problems. And also there's drought issues and then the wildfire side of things too, where all of us live in what I think it's called the WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface, which is a term I learned this past summer. I did not know this before, but these are the climate terms that are kind of sneaking into things because of how things are changing for us. So with everything you just said, I want to go to a town and hear a bit about what they're going through, what they've been going through, how they're trying to adapt, and what all of that means. And so we've got a couple of towns to do this with today, and this is all about kind of like adapting for where we are and looking at where we're going. So Triffy Parsons is on the line, town clerk manager for the town of Hare Bay. Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Hi there, everyone.
All right. And folks, for those of you in studio with me, Ashley, Kathleen, if I miss anything with Triffy, because you both intimately know this story, do say something. Your mics are on. You're allowed to talk, even if I'm asking a couple of questions. Triffy, what's the population of Hare Bay?
975 people.
And you got Dover just next door too, right? They're at 480 something and change?
Yes, about 487, I think.
Okay. What have you been going through in the last year and a bit, or in the last couple of years, when it comes to climate impacts for Hare Bay?
Well, in November last year, 2024, I think it rained for 40 days straight. It was just extraordinary. We had flooding in the brook that became a raging river that affected homeowners. It affected our fire department because it literally sits right next to that brook, and normally it's not an issue. At one point, Department of Highways thought they were going to have to shut the road down there because the water was elevated to the extent that we didn't know if anyone could be able to safely cross. Our pump house was affected by it. I think it might have been down about a half inch to an inch before it would have went in and fried everything in our pump house. Like, it was that close to the threshold of the doorway. The boys had to actually put waders on to try to get in there because we couldn't even take our vehicle in there. It was floating away. Then January the 5th, we ended up with a storm surge that wiped out some of our outfalls, backed up some of our sewers because of the seaweed going into it, wiped out wharfs, destroyed our boat launch area, the gazebo area as well. So now we're back into having the rains again, and there's more shorelines being destroyed, more wharfs being destroyed. Like, it seems to be an unending cycle, and we've had 3 sewer backups since Saturday. Because of this.
Since Saturday?
Since Saturday, yeah.
Okay. Look, In my limited experience, town clerks and managers in Newfoundland and Labrador have enough on their plates dealing with the town clerky manager stuff, let alone massive climate impacts that you're describing. What's it like in your position of just taking all of this in, talking with folks in the community, and figuring out where to go forward with all of these impacts you just described?
Well, you kind of got to roll with the flow when you're in this position. I think it's part of the job description that they forgot to put in there. But overall, you do speak to the residents and you try to get a grip on it. Now, with the storm surge in January, we put in for disaster relief fund. So we actually just had CCON out here last Thursday, and they were here from 10 in the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon, going around and seeing all the sites that were damaged and trying to decide what to put in for under the tender package, because, we need rock, we need everything. We got to figure out how not to have the outfall pipes being broken and filling up and all these issues. But overall, as town clerk manager, we really, really care about our communities, and it doesn't matter what the job is, but climate change is a biggie for us. We all talk about it when we're together, and we want to make sure our communities are safe.
Do you have were there any estimates on like dollar figures on all these damages?
Over 700,000.
Okay. Right.
785 plus. From one storm.
So that's just the January 5th one?
Yes.
Right. So that's the storm surge. If you have are you also looking at moving the pump house because of the previous flooding?
Yes, I've had municipal infrastructure out here already and talked to them and showed them pictures of the area and how close it came to having these massive pumps, which, it's all electrical in that building, and then you got liquid chlorine in the building, so there's so many possibilities for a disaster to happen there. And we talked about relocating it to the opposite end of the town and putting in a capital works project, but that is going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And we talked about it, but just to remind folks, if that pump house fails, right? If water goes in and just shorts the whole thing, there's no water for you folks.
For us and Dover, because Dover gets their water supply from us as well.
Yeah, so then you're crawling upwards of 1,500 people just short of it without water if it fails, which is why you're looking and being like, hey, can we let's try to be proactive here and kind of take a look, Kathleen.
And fire flows.
And fire flows.
Yes.
Explain fire flows.
The same water system that supplies the drinking water is also the source for the hydrants in the communities.
Right.
Yeah.
An added layer.
Yeah.
Yes. And this past summer, Dover had a fire down there where we responded. We had the water bombers out and everything. And again, that's a serious issue for us because we're going from wet to extremely dry. And there are no fire breaks anywhere around any of these communities, which is impacting us as well. And if that ridge, I'll call it, for between Dover and Hare Bay catches on fire, they really have no way out unless there are boats available. And we have a fish plant in Dover that needs water from us as well, right?
Yeah, and it's that, Triffy, it's that climate change bit that you mentioned, right? When it's wet, it's way too wet because the atmosphere, it holds more moisture and then kind of like splush. And then when it's dry, it's way too dry. And in between, you're not getting like what you're kind of used to. And then there's also the unknown of is it going to be really too wet this month or is it going to be really too dry this month? And will it change next month and all of that stuff? So for yourself in Hare Bay and the folks there, you're looking at the pump house. You've got engineers in looking at what was caused in January by the storm surge. What's the look ahead then of just how are you going to continue to try to plan and adapt and do that whole roll with the flow type of a thing?
Well, really and truly, we got to look further into the future, and we really have to seriously see about getting that pump house out of that dangerous location. And it's the same with our fire hall. Like one portion of it where the trucks are at, well, if that river gets blocked, we're not getting anybody anywhere. And we service Dover as well. And nowadays, with more medical calls and more accidents, we respond to those as well. So we got to look at placement of all the infrastructure. We got to decide what is best and how we can keep our shoreline that's going to last, because you can't put something there one year and then look at having to replace it the next year. So literally any infrastructure for the town has to be rethought, and where is higher grounds, where is safer locations, where can we sustain these things, what is our alternative for if our wet wells go so low that we can't supply water to our fire departments. It's not just one thing gets affected, it's everything that gets affected. So, and this summer we had the wet well go so low that we had to tell people, to conserve water, because if we need it for our fire trucks, then it's not going to be there.
Right. So to go from the fire department might be flooded and also the pump house might be flooded to like, hey, conserve water because now there's not enough water for the fire department and for the pump house. Like it's just plus storm surges and the coastline being washed away. So all of that is the things you're dealing with. Okay. That's a lot of stuff.
And actually the program that Kathleen and them are working with, they have come out and residents have really responded well to it. They've come and said, 20 years ago, the shoreline was here. 20 years ago, we didn't have to worry about the bridge here. And it's an incredible amount of information, which we will use to be able to make sure that whatever we do, we're doing based on the fact that, okay, the shoreline changed 10 feet. Well, we know we have to be on higher ground. The river is increasing. Well, all our infrastructure for those components has to be in a different location. Anyone that wants to build an infill will know what's the impact of that. Does it affect our brook there? Does it affect the river? Like all of those factors. It's not just, giving someone a permit nowadays, or let's put in a capital works project and get this or that. You really got to look at the things that are going to be our priorities and the needs to make sure we can do what we're supposed to do, and that's supply services to our population.
Triffy Parsons, thanks so much for coming on the show and talking about what's going on in and around Hare Bay. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
All right, cheers. Triffy Parsons there, town clerk manager, town of Hare Bay. Kathleen, I'll go back. Triffy was talking about you folks being out there too with MNL. All right, so I'll pass the baton to you and talk to us about what you've been doing a little bit more and the reception that she alluded to and mentioned.
So Climate Ready NL is kind of a stepwise process. Our focus is small towns, and the capacity building is really in the areas that allow them to get into the adaptation conversation. There are resources that are out there that they can go after that Ashley is very active in already in delivering. But they often, the price of admission is being able to tell their story. Yeah. What is happening so far? What are some of the directions of change that they're dealing with? And Climate Ready NL is going to document 100 of those circumstances. We start out by visiting the town and doing a day-long open house, invite people in the community to come in and record the flooding that happened on such and such a date, what they've seen around their property, what they've seen, in their neighbor's property or further down the shore. We have a map available. We keep a running tally with stickies on the sides of the map of their observations if they're spatial in nature. We also record observations that people are offering about historic change. Many of these communities, in living memory, you could drive across the ice in the bay, and Freshwater Bay, Hare Bay and Dover, we heard exactly those sorts of stories.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. You don't need a magnifying glass when you listen to trivia. You're like, oh my gosh, like these are massive, massive issues that are not like you're not searching for them. Like it is pretty darn obvious as to what's hitting places.
Yeah, and these are the stories that get kind of generalized otherwise as sea level rise, yes, hotter days, more of them, increased wildfire risks. But when you actually hear them in this very granular fashion, not only does it reveal the real depth of impact and the sort of knock-on effects that communities are actually dealing with, but it puts an entirely different face on the conversation.
Well, and to know that, like when I was talking to Jill English, right, from her reporting out of Brazil, to know that in this case, Jill mentioned developing nations and money being diverted from healthcare and from other spending. Well, that's going to be here too, right? When you have climate impacts, money has to come from somewhere, and then also like it to be put somewhere, it comes from somewhere, and the pot is only so big when it comes to climate change, and also. I'll have to do a future show on this. When it comes to insurance, there's a big discussion in globally around what insurance looks like. Go to California, where parts of that state are not insurable anymore because of wildfires, right?
Absolutely.
Ashley, thoughts?
If Triffy, if you're still listening, thank you very much. It's nice to hear your voice. The work that Kathleen is doing with MNL and Climate Ready NL is desperately important because the lived experience is such a key part of the evidence base whenever you're trying to figure out how to move forward. There's no other high quality data. Like there's no other source of it than talking to the people. And people know their community better than anyone else does, and they know what their community needs. And so being able to create a space that they feel safe in, that they can come and they can talk about things that are honestly pretty frightening, is really, really important. And so Fundamental is a part of your Climate Ready NL project as technical support, and we're really excited to be a part of that and be there, at the edge, helping these communities really address how do we move forward, how do we prevent this from happening again. And a project that we're doing also with Kathleen and municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, is a local leadership for climate action. It's an FCM funded project. And Hare Bay is a part of a 5-community cohort along the Kittiwake coast. And what we're looking to do with that is create detailed watershed models, because so that we understand how the watershed is functioning, how when it rains, how it moves across the land, when it storms, how it hits the coast. And if we can create a model that's then validated by the lived experience of the residents, then we can create projected scenarios. And so Joel Finnis, I know if he was here, he would say, with their climate modeling, they actually projected that overall the total annual precipitation was not likely to change. It was the pattern of precipitation that was likely to change. And this is a clear evidence of that being shown, right? Is that we don't get rainy days in July anymore. We get them all in November, and it's a torrent, and we have to figure out how to deal with that. And if we can do those models, then we can put the town in a position where you can run a scenario.
Yeah, and Joel Finnis, Memorial University climatologist, he's been on this show multiple times before.
Thank you.
Also, just to that point, the bigger point. Well, looking at rain in today, and it's gosh, is it like what I've been describing for my house? It's been like living inside a car wash for the last few systems that have come through. I'm like, what is going on? Loads of water, but you're right. Summer was dry. It was the same thing. I was talking to Ashley Brawlweiler, CBC meteorologist, back. I think it was the August stats, because there was like dry, and then all of a sudden wet, and like when you look at the month, you're like, oh, that was kind of like the normal precept that but no, it's not normal, because it was dry. Then all of it came at once, and that has such an impact on on things. And by the way, the average, if memory serves me correctly, for the island of Newfoundland, I don't have the Labrador stat on this one, but for the island, average precip for a year is about 1,400 millimeters of rain per year.
Yeah, that's about, it's somewhere between 1 meter and 1.5 meters is what I have in my brain roughly. Yeah.
All right, woohoo.
Yeah.
There we go. Let's go to another, I want to go to Trout River, and we've got Deputy Mayor Marcia Crocker on the line. Hi.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I guess. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
What's Trout River been going through when it comes to climate change and impacts?
We're seeing quite a few impacts of climate change. We're primarily a fishing and farming community here, and those impacts have been huge on both. We have seen a lot of rising water levels on our shoreline, a lot of increased wave action, more wind, really a lot of drier summers, and not much rain. We've seen that affecting our crops. We have a lot of subsistence farmers here in the community that plant their own vegetable gardens that haven't been doing as well because of less rain throughout the summers. We are seeing less snow in the winter, which we're being told, again, is a part of climate change. Things are, because of the less snow, less rain, a lot drier, so a lot tougher in areas related to our farming, especially here. With regards to our fishing industries here in town, the higher levels of wind are crazy. It's blowing I'm part of a fishing family here in town, and the amount of days that we're losing due to wind are numbers that have never been seen before. When it comes to the stocks that we're pursuing, we're seeing a lot of the fish that we normally would go after, the capelin, the herring. They're not coming ashore here anymore. It's been years since the capelin actually rolled on our beach, and we were a prominent community where every year for the whole month of June, half of July, you'd have capelin coming ashore. It's not that we believe the fish aren't there. It's just that they're staying further offshore because the waters are warmer. We're following them. My family follows them all the way to Labrador now, where they're still in an abundance. And we believe it's because the waters are warmer. We've noticed definitely temperature changes within the water, and we think that that's affecting the fishing industry, which is still the main economy here in our town. So we're definitely seeing a lot of effects of climate change.
Yeah, and to give folks, and to go for the geography lesson for a second, we started talking with Triffy Parsons in the town of Hare Bay, Kittiwake Coast. So, like, next to Dover, same neck of the woods. It's kind of like the Gambo, just in further. And then for you folks, I mean, you're on the west coast of the island, just at, like, I guess at the start of the Great Northern Peninsula before you start making your way up, just nestled in there. And you mentioned, like fishing community, things have been changing. You're deputy mayor. What, like, when you're seeing all of this happen, and then trying to fit, and like those winds, what's the look ahead like for you then, and how do you, like, when you're deputy mayor, what's the conversation like of like, hey, what do we do now, and what do we do into the future, and how are we trying to adapt?
So we're trying very much to be proactive rather than reactive. For the past number of years, we've had very much a lot of conversations around what's happening. At one point, we had a beautiful boardwalk at the front of our community, and we've tried different ways of addressing the wave action that we're seeing out there. We put in armor stone. We did different mitigation factors with regards to the construction of the boardwalk itself. Nothing has worked. So in the last little bit, we've entered a feasibility study. Actually, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. We entered a cohort that was actually looking at climate change and the effects of climate change along the coastal areas of Newfoundland and Labrador. And this cohort has given us a better idea of what's to come and actually helped us to start to think about ideas that we can start to mitigate what it is we expect to be coming. And with that in mind, we've actually submitted an application for a feasibility study to actually look at different ways that we can, especially along the waterfront here in town, where we do have homes, businesses, town infrastructure, ways that we can actually go about creating sea breaks in that area. And we're actually now have that application sent in, and we're actually looking to create what we call a living shoreline, or it's a living shoreline project that we've applied for, are looking at through the feasibility study that will help create a natural barrier out there. And we're looking to tie that into another really great project we're looking at for our town. I don't know if you recall, a few years ago we had some blue whales that, again, I believe were lost due to climate change. Well, one of them came ashore here on our beach, and we worked with the ROM. They took it away. But in thinking about how we want this living shoreline to look, we're looking at incorporating some aspects of possibly blue whale shape into how we create this possible living shoreline. Of course, we're just in the feasibility application stage of that process, but we are definitely trying to look towards different areas and different ways that we can prepare our town for what's to come.
Deputy Mayor Crocker, how long have you been on council for?
This will be my third term. I just started my third term on council, so I have 8 years of experience but I've been involved with the town in other aspects pretty well my entire adulthood.
Well, congrats on your third term. This type of leadership, how potent, or when it comes to climate change, how involved was it 8 years ago or early when you first got involved with the town compared to do you feel it's ramping up now for what you're trying to look at and do and change, or is it where are things at with just the strength of it all?
So I was elected to council first in 2017, the fall October of 2017, and in January of 2018, we had a major event happen here with rains and wind and a storm that was sort of baptism by fire for me with my political endeavor. We were cut off for days with landslides here in the community. So that, for me, really started to ramp up at that point that we really needed to start taking climate change seriously. And we've been definitely working towards this ever since. We've had different ideas, different plans. I'm actually with the Harbor Authority here in town as well, and with that respect, DFO has come in and done some amazing work on our wharf to make that more sustainable for future use. With some sheet piling that they've used, a different technique that we had also looked at maybe for our waterfront. So we're considering lots of avenues and lots of things that could be done. And pretty well since my beginning on council, it has been forefront of on the minds of this council, the previous councils that I've been part of. And we're very excited that the current council is able to pick up where our council that just left in October left off, and are helping to move very much forward with the programs and projects that we have started. It's very exciting. We're very hopeful that we'll be able to see some of these things start to come to fruition very soon.
Deputy Mayor Crocker, thanks so much for coming on the show and just sharing what's going on with your town and that look ahead there. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Marcia Crocker there, Trout River Deputy Mayor. So, we started in Hare Bay. We're talking Trout River. Those are the two town examples for today. But I mean, look, my mind is back in the winter too, when I was up in Nain with work. And as fall comes in, I'm thinking about the communities on the North Coast, wondering about the sea ice situation for this year. When will it form? How, what will the condition be? So for the full province, right, for every community, there's these climate looks of real importance, of impact to people everywhere. Thoughts for both of you here in studio on what Marcia was saying?
Yeah, and the climate impacts, of course, further north you go, the more dramatic they've been. You know, they really have been the canaries in this particular coal mine.
The front line, so to speak, of climate change.
And the fact that we're actually having conversations now down on the island of Newfoundland that sound a heck of a lot like the conversations around the disappearing ice that has been happening in the Arctic for the last several decades.
Yeah, and it's this theme of loss of way of life, right? Loss of culture, way of life, how we from the income side of it to the culture side of it to just folks who have been used to being up north, having a highway system on the ice in the winter. And then here we talk about fishing communities. And it's like, look, everything that was just laid out, whether it was Triffy Parsons or Marcia Crocker. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. that's the core, like that understanding that those changes are happening is the core of what the motivation is between Climate Ready NL and the local leadership for climate adaptation, is because we know the changes are happening, and you have to address it head on, even when it's scary, because you can't stick your head in the sand. You can't you have to try and solve the problem, but solving a problem when your entire way of life or your identity is getting like poked at. It's a struggle, and I really do think that working as a team and working as a community and using like the consensus-based decision making and leaning into resident engagement, like that's the forum where we find solutions.
And one standout bit from what you're saying there for me, for these conversations with both the communities, right, Hare Bay and Trout River today, I didn't hear hopelessness from anyone. I heard two local municipal leaders who were very, even the word like aggressive in terms of like saying, hey, this is what's been happening. We've seen it. So we're trying to understand it. We're trying to get some data. We're trying to make plans. We're looking where funding comes from. Also, it's like we're even looking at a blue whale design, like putting art in with something as well. Like that is so far from like hopelessness. It's really something to have folks so bought into like the way they're describing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Newfoundlanders were a stalwart bunch, for sure. And I do. Any of the communities that we have worked with, and I think Kathleen might say the same thing, is there is a determination to say like this is my home, and like we need to solve these problems. We need to ensure public safety. We need to ensure stability of municipal infrastructure services. We need to do this, and so it's always heartening when you start to look at how much people care and how the strength of the community creates that momentum and staves off the hopelessness, because it can get pretty grim if you focus on all of the things that are sort of happening to you. But if you hang on to the agency and you hang on to like, we have data, we have team, we have community, we have commitment, there are resources. If you can hang on to that, then you can start to move yourself forward, and you can, it's a dial, it's not a switch, right? Like it's not a we fixed it and you can walk away and do something else. It's like you need to move the dial in this direction, and we can do that by coming together as a community, by teaming up, by stacking project funding, by aligning projects so that they can run in parallel with each other. And we've seen good results, and we have to continue to do more.
Yeah. And the sector working much more so as a team as well. I think this is a big shift for us as municipal organizations, actually having more or less a common front now on climate action, and some of the work that is being done is going to be deployed through each and every one of the 4 participating organizations as well. So building their capacity in many instances to shore up capacity that may not be available locally oftentimes, particularly when we're dealing with our smaller communities that are the vast majority of the municipal scene in this province.
Yeah, so then and like tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about this thing called the just transition, right? As you try to move from an economy with carbon pollution into one that's more electrified, without the burning of fossil fuels. As this tries to happen, how do you do that and have people have jobs and still have a good economy? So that's tomorrow's conversation. But then today, it's the conversation around as that happens, and it depends how fast it happens or not, right? And then you have the outlook of how like global warming and extreme weather and all of that. How do we adapt our communities, and how do communities adapt to? Is it moving the pump house? Is it doing like they're doing in Miquelon for St. Pierre and Miquelon of moving a whole little community up into a higher ground, still staying on the island of Miquelon? Is it looking at your shoreline? Is it having a breakwater? Like all these questions. But then all of it comes down to data though, right? and best practices and trying to figure out like what's the watershed like and everything else. So where are things going with both of you and the work you're doing and what's the look ahead? Keep working.
Keep it on.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we had a late start on our original project work plan, which is it's a 2-year program of work that we had to start 6 months into that original schedule. So this summer was a truncated field season. So we've got about 14 of the 100 communities are through the open houses right now. We expect to be able to do a few more before the snow flies, but basically we've had to populate our workflows for this winter to then get the other streams up and running. And we'll be working very closely with Ashley and her team on the follow-up by the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Fire Services, working with local participating fire departments on their emergency plan updates, taking a climate-informed look at what's there already, and also developing the program of work with the Stewardship Association of Municipalities that a smaller number of our municipal members will be doing, but that will focus very much so on the low-hanging fruit of nature-based adaptation options.
Yeah. Corner Brook later this week? Right?
Corner Brook later this week, the largest municipal sector gathering of the year. Our Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador Conference takes place starting on, it starts tomorrow in the sense of pre-conference activities, but Thursday is the first full day. We have a Climate Ready NL panel discussion that afternoon, focusing on a bit of a debrief on the wildfire season that we've just experienced that is going to be participated in by the mayor and deputy mayor of Musgrave Harbour.
Right.
So we'll be revisiting that particular wildfire experience earlier in the summer, in case anybody's forgotten that one, because there was definitely more to follow. Both of those elected officials are also firefighters. And so they will be in conversation with Rob Pinkson from the province's Emergency Operations Division, and Evan Cox, the recently elected new president for the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Fire Services. So that's going to be a very significant conversation, and most all of our program partners are going to be present at the conference as well. So chance for towns that haven't signed up yet to meet our team. We have 3 Climate Ready NL interns who have been brought on and have been through the fieldwork experience. So they have their own stories to tell as well.
No shortage of stuff to talk about. And yeah, I'll be interested to follow up on that. I typically get to the M&L things once a year, so I won't be at this one Friday, but I'll be trying to make the one in typically Gander in the spring.
Our symposium, yes.
Yes, the symposium.
Beginning of May. Mark it in your calendar.
Yes, well, yeah, and I do, because it's I always enjoy getting to those, because when any type of municipal conversation, community leader conversation, there's folks from all across, all around the province who go to this, and it's super valuable. I find for me to be there to hear from folks. Pretty much out of time. I mean, only a minute or two left. Ashley Smith, any other thoughts from you today before we close down the show?
I don't know that, I don't know, we've talked pretty thoroughly about stuff. I would like to acknowledge how hard it is to be a counselor in a small community, as well as a staff person. As you heard both from Triffy and the deputy mayor and Marcia, they have a lot to deal with just to keep a normal town running. And then they also have to deal with all of this additional stuff. And there's always complexities and overlap. And, there's a lot of data that needs to be created that's specific to the community, but then it also has to be made accessible in a way that a non-technical person can actually use it to make a decision.
Yeah, to be in a position where you have drought, flooding, storm surge in 1 year.
Exactly.
And impacts on all of that, and you're in a town of fewer than 1,000 people.
Yeah, it's a lot. And so I do want to acknowledge how hard they work.
Thank you for that. And thank you both for coming in for day one of Climate Week, our third year in a row of doing it. I really appreciate both your time.
Thank you for asking us.
Thank you. Absolutely.
And folks, if you're sitting down in your community somewhere in Newfoundland and Labrador thinking, I've noticed stuff, climate impacts on my community. If there's something you want us to know about here on The Signal, give me an email, thesignal@cbc.ca, or call the Signal line and leave a message, 709-576-5260. That is it for day one of Climate Week. We've got a full week of local climate impacts and coverage for you here on The Signal. We will be live at the Delta tomorrow for the NL Federation of Labor's convention. We're going to talk about the just transition with economist Jim Stanford, who is in town. My anchor guest will be President Jessica McCormick. We will talk about climate change in the workforce, plus other topics of note outside of climate change as well at the Federation of Labor's convention. That is tomorrow, only here on The Signal. Cheers.